Curt Isakson here with the brass tacks and hard facts of weapon selection for today's fires. Understanding weapon selection for today's fires and what Andy Fredericks told us. A nozzle is to a firefighter what a rifle is to a soldier in wartime. And it is the nozzle and the firefighter who win the fight against fire. Traditionally in the fire service, we started out with a basic smoothbore, solid stream type nozzle. Still, the nozzle for today's fire service is one of the options, one of the mainstays in the American fire service. Known to be traditionally pumped at 50 PSI for the tip to give you a set flow based on the size of the tip. Here I hold a 7/8 tip smoothbore at 50 PSI. It roughly gives you 160 gallons a minute. Well, what we need to understand is that a 50 PSI smoothbore nozzle can be underpumped and overpumped if you understand the tip size and the hose that's packaged with your weapon selection. Here, talking about the 7/8, I underpump it down at 40 PSI, I roughly getting 140 gallons a minute. If I want to overpump it and I pump it at 60 PSI, I'm roughly getting 180 gallons a minute. If I'm underpumping or overpumping, knowing how that's going to affect the reach of my stream and also how it's going to affect the kinking inside the hose lines. We talked about the 7/8 being your standard bread and butter house fire type nozzle, but we also have the very common 15/16 smoothbore at 50 PSI, roughly giving us 185 gallons a minute. It too can be underpumped at 40 PSI, dropping it down to roughly 160 gallons a minute, or overpumping it at 60 and getting somewhere around 200 gallons a minute. The key factor is just with the 7/8 is when we underpump it, how's it gonna affect your hose and nozzle package in the relation to kinking on the fire ground. So let's move on to the bigger nozzle for more of a commercial fire attack or a standpipe operation, the 2.5-inch smoothbore. That, once again, is still traditionally known as a 50 PSI, but it too can be pumped at 40 or 60. The 2.5-inch nozzle, historically speaking, had the triple stack on it with the 1 inch, the 1.1 inch, the 1.25 inch. What I hold here today is the 1 3/16 tip, which roughly is 300 gallons a minute at 50 PSI nozzle pressure. When underpumped at 40, is going to give you closer to that 1.8 inch tip at 265 roughly. And if you overpump it, it's going to give you that 1.25 inch at 325. Next on our weapon selection, we're going to talk about the automatic or constant pressure nozzle that's been in the fire service for a little over 40 years. The automatic nozzle definitely has a place in a fire service. It's a nozzle that constantly gives us a good reach and stream, and the good reach is one of our top threes that we need. It's like the thumb over a garden hose. The more pressure you apply to the tip of the garden hose, the longer the reach in the stream is. And what we have instead of a thumb is we have the spring here inside the automatic nozzle that when no water is applied or no pressure is applied, the spring is fully elongated. As we up the RPMs on the apparatus and apply more pressure, the spring will compress, allowing the flow range to go to a higher range. So the automatic nozzle will flow large amounts of water if the proper pressure is applied to it. But if for some reason we have a water supply issue and we have exposure issues, at low water supplies, we can still have that stream reaching the objective, it being exposure to provide proper water on the exposure itself. Another reason an automatic should be on all apparatus as an option, maybe not always pre-connected to your house fire attack line, but for foam operations. The automatic nozzle is a great nozzle when we're talking about creating foam and being able to match it up with the foam given for your actual apparatus. The automatic nozzle is a great nozzle when we're trying to apply water to large number of exposures at a reduced water supply option. So understanding that the automatic nozzle is a variable flow nozzle with a constant pressure based on the spring itself. Next to the automatic, we have the fixed gallonage or constant gallonage. I hold here is a 150 at 50. As you can see, side by side to the automatic, there's not a spring, there's just a set stem in here that when water's applied opens to a certain distance to allow a given flow at whatever pressure. This is a 150 at 50. You can change these stems out. Could be a 150 at 75 or a 175 at 75, 200 at 75. So you have a constant or fixed flow nozzle that you can change its flow and pressure by basically just changing out this stem I look at a fixed or constant gallonage when you talk about a 150 at 50, right here being comparable in the mainstay of the fire service. I call this a traditional mainstay nozzle of the fire service. When I put this chief nozzle, the 150 at 50, next to the 7/8, this 150 at 50 gives you a variable streams. You can have a straight stream, or a wide fog pattern, or a narrow fog pattern at 150 at 50. So it too is a nozzle that will give you that 150 gallons a minute, which is the accepted, understood minimum flow for today's interior fire attack, but gives you that ability to apply a fog stream, as where a smooth bore will not give you a fog stream. So these two nozzles, when we talk about interior fire attack on today and tomorrow's fires, both at 50 psi nozzle pressure, will achieve that 150 GPM as a minimum for today's fires. So moving on to the other nozzle would be a Selecto gallonage nozzle. This one here has a range from 30 to 200. So once again, it too does not manufacture water. None of these nozzles manufacture water. It requires an understanding of what the pump discharge pressure will give based on the length of hose when it comes out the end of the nozzle. So understanding that if I have a required low flow, that the pump operator knows that I'm trying to achieve a 30 GPM flow. If I dial up, just because I dial up to 200, I'm not gonna guarantee get 200 gallons a minute without communicating with the driver engineer, pumping that based on understanding the friction loss for the hose to get 200 GPM out the end of a Selecto gallonage nozzle. The one thing I like to say when I'm talking to somebody about nozzles and weapon selection, the big three. What is the desired amount you're trying to achieve at your fire? Is it 150? Is it 300? What is it? The desired amount being number one. Two, that desired amount's got to reach your objective. You got to get that water on the burning solid fuels if it's an interior fire attack. So what's the reach of the stream at a given pressure? When we're talking about under pumping it at 40, what's that reach going to be? Is it still going to have the flow, and is it going to have the reach that you need? And lastly, the one that still is very important is what's the nozzle reaction? What is the combat mobility of it? Is it a nozzle reaction so high that you're not going to be able to move beyond the threshold of the front door, move down that hallway, and get water to the seat of the fire? So understanding the 1, 2, 3, the desired amount, the desired reach, and the desired nozzle reaction to give you a nozzle hose package that will get water on your next fire.